So since we're doing a special
Ooh,
episode
okay.
on AI,
Yes.
I thought that the only way that you could start a special episode on AI is to ask AI to tell some AI jokes. All
Okay.
right.
All right.
So that's
like
what I
it.
did.
I
So
like it.
I said AI, I want to tell Robert some jokes. Give me some jokes about AI. So here you go. Here's just a couple. There's just so
Yes.
many. There's
That's
so
right.
many.
Okay.
So why did the AI break up with its algorithm?
I don't know.
It just wasn't processing the same way anymore. Okay, that's not very good.
That's
Okay,
really bad. That's like,
why did the AI bring a ladder to work?
I don't know.
To reach the cloud.
these are
This is so bad. I know. That's why I love
this is what
them.
we're using for our marketing
Okay,
now.
here's the last one.
Okay.
Because and by the way, these are the best 3 of 10.
Okay.
They gave me 10, and these are the best ones.
Okay.
So here's the last one.
Yeah.
What is AI's favorite music genre?
Okay. What?
Deep learning bass.
I'm just sad.
It's amazing, right?
I'm
They're
just
so
sad.
bad, they're good.
Yeah, I'm just sad.
And now for anyone that hasn't tuned out, we'll start the show.
Just remember, everybody has your story to tell. Tell it well. Let this old marketing.
And now, for your listening pleasure, here's Pulizzi and Rose, covering the week of media, marketing, and digital content news. This Old Marketing. Take it away, boys.
Hello, friends. Welcome to This Old Marketing, proudly brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. And I'm Robert Rose, and welcome to episode number 445 for Friday. That's right, Friday, September the 13th, Friday the 13th, 2024. And with me, as always, is my pal, my colleague, and the guy who is taking over Adele's residency in Las Vegas, Mr. Joe Pulizzi.
Is she leaving?
She has announced, that after her residency in Las Vegas, she's going to take as she put it, a long time off.
I think that she is wonderful.
She's amazing. Adele is awesome.
There's, I mean, I want to say a few, but there's only a certain amount of people in the world where you immediately know it's them.
Yeah,
singing, and she is one of them. She's like, right. And
I love her voice.
I just absolutely love everything that she's done, and I'm gonna miss her because I didn't even get a chance to see her.
Well, you can go to Vegas. The residency is not over for some time, but she says.
Did you see her? What you could have seen her. You were just in Vegas. You could have seen.
I know.
It
would have been lovely to see. I don't think it started yet. I could be wrong on that. I could be wrong. I'm sure the audience will call me out on that if I'm wrong about that. But
I'm sure we are wrong. I'm sure they call us out for the football episode. Yeah. I've been getting more emails from people about how they thought that my football picks were ridiculous.
Yes, I have too. About your picks being ridiculous.
Well, you picked Homer picks. I mean, you picked like the picks that everybody would pick.
I picked smart picks, is what I did.
You just the fact that you overlooked with the crowd like you always do.
No, you overlooked Miami for sure. For some weird reason, you're putting the Jets of. I can't. I can't even with the Jets, and the Rams. I mean, your picks are odd, to be sure.
You just wait.
To be sure.
I'm so glad we did that episode because I can't wait to rerun it again. When it all actually
it's going to be fun. Yeah, I think it's going to be. I mean, because here's the thing: we're probably both so wrong. We're both so wrong about all of it.
Well, I really wanted to pick a winning record for my Browns, but and of course we're recording this. We're recording this. We know, like when people are listening to this, our game has already happened.
That's right.
So we can't talk about it like we're recording it beforehand. For obvious reasons.
That's right. One of us has lost already, and the other is reveling in the fact that
we'll be wearing a different jersey. Probably
we're wearing a different
week.
jersey. Yes, that's right. Next week we will wear a different jersey.
I should.
Yeah.
If I lose, I want to wear a Rams jersey. I don't want to wear Cowboys.
Well, you do what you need to do, but
I will not wear I will not wear.
Okay, so
Cowboys
here's the question for you. If you have to wear a jersey, not that you're going to have to go buy one, and I don't even know if you have a friend who could loan you one.
No, there's many Cowboys jerseys are so easy to get. They're every thrift store.
Right.
They're just everywhere.
Or well played, sir.
Go into Burlington or like whatever, TJ Maxx.
Yep.
They're all
Salvation
on the
Army.
Rack.
Yes, I get it.
Salvation Army.
Yeah. Right. No, but whose would you wear? Like whose would you wear?
If I wasn't a Browns fan?
That's right.
And I wanted to root for a different team. The Browns didn't exist.
Whose Cowboys journey would you wear? I'm not.
Who's Cowboys? To wear this one. I don't want to wear a Cowboys jersey. Yeah. Who's Cowboys? I would wear Tom Landry's hat. Is what I would probably first and foremost. I can't say Tony Romo because that's your guy. But I love Tony Romo as an announcer, as a color analyst. I think that Tony is fantastic. So I'm gonna dodge. I'd probably go with Zeke. I'd probably go with
Zeke. Yeah, that's Elliott. Good for the Cleveland connection. Yeah,
Cleveland connection, Ohio State, the whole thing. Yeah. I would probably go with that. Speaking of that, just wasn't even going to bring this up, but
hold on. By the way, not that you asked, but I'm going to tell you anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, go ahead.
If I can pick a Browns jersey, it would be Brian Sipe. So,
Brian Sipe, Cardiac Kids.
Yep,
one of the quarterbacks. I won't say top quarterback.
Brian
Sipe did a lot with the talent he had.
I know,
fantastic. And
he's like your Tony Romo. He's like your Tony Romo.
That Browns team in 79, 80, 81 was super exciting because of Doug Deacon and Brian Sipe and Reggie Rucker and Ozzie Newsome and a great, wonderful, wonderful team. So yeah. Oh, that's a good one. I like that. I don't even know. I have to go with Johnny Manziel if I was going with the Browns because I have my lucky Johnny Manziel jersey that doesn't lose, that I will be wearing, that I wore to our game, that hopefully propelled the Browns to a win. And we shouldn't talk about it because whatever. I can't do it. So what are we doing here today?
We're going to do a special. Yeah, we're going to do a special episode sort of in celebration of MAICON, which we will both be attending. And in fact, are attending literally as this show. It'll be over, I guess, by the time Friday morning rolls around. But we will have it just finished attending.
Just finished.
And we're going to see a lot of friends and really colleagues that have really moved into the AI space. Me being one of them. And I have a talk about AI. And we kind of wanted to just talk a little bit about what's going on with the world of AI, and especially not dissimilar from the show that we did about how we do this podcast, sort of a behind the scenes of how we do this podcast, sort of how you and I, given our various professional lives, are using generative AI in both our business and our personal lives, just to see where, the trends might be and what people might identify with and maybe somebody learned something. I don't know, but yeah, we're gonna. So it's an AI episode.
Has that happened? Has anyone ever learned anything?
Rarely
from listening to this.
Rarely.
Never. Actually, one of our goals. That's one of our goals. We don't want anyone to learn anything. We just want to be entertaining. That's what we do. So how is this gonna go?
What we're gonna do is we're gonna talk a little bit about the state of AI. And maybe bleed a little bit into my presentation, because that's kind of what I'm talking about as it pertains specifically to marketing, because it's obviously AI is a huge, huge topic. And much to the chagrin, I think, of everybody in business and marketing, there's more to it than just generative AI. But we're going to be primarily speaking about generative AI and content creation and marketing and the stuff that we chatter on about in this show. So I'll talk a little bit about my presentation, and that'll tee us up to trade back and forth. We've each prepared our 3, not best use cases, but 3 most common use cases for how we're using AI in our professional lives and personal lives. which, we can talk a little bit about, and then get the heck out of here.
That sounds like that's wonderful. And did you ever think that you would be doing speeches on AI?
It's a great question. And I think the answer to that is a qualified yes. I did not see what happened in 2023 coming. Well, let's call it 2022, really. I mean,
November 22 when ChatGPT first came on the scenes. Yeah.
So
we're about 2 years. So we're almost 2 years from that event.
Almost to the day. Yeah. Interestingly enough. And so it's an interesting thing. And it was funny because I actually went back and looked at some of my, 2014, 2015, 2016. We've talked about AI on the show before. I actually did a presentation on AI at Content Marketing World one year. But it wasn't about generative AI. It was literally, you did on stage, you did a thing where you challenged, I'm forgetting who it was. You challenged somebody to basically tell the difference between something that was AI created versus something that was human created. It was news articles or something like that. Do you remember this?
I do. So, this is, I remember, a lot of it's because Paul Reitzer and I have been friends for a long time. And Paul is, I think, one of the unquestioned leaders in the space. But going back to, this is 2013 at Content Tech. And I remember, like, I was presenting some things and talking about some things, but we were in the back, and we had the team there, and I was talking to Claire McDermott. Claire McDermott
that's who it
was editor of Chief Content Officer magazine at the time.
Right.
And we had a conversation going about AI, and there was this big article in the New York Times about they were doing this. Hey, is this AI? Is this AI? Whatever. And a lot of people, some people could tell and some people couldn't tell. And she says, this is so ridiculous. Like, anybody can tell whether something's AI or not. And I said, in the next couple of years, you will not be able, like, nobody will be able to tell what's computer generated or not. And she thought I was crazy. Like, I had two heads. I said, you will not be able to tell. And I said, the majority of content, like I did my whole prediction thing, the majority of content out there will have some kind of computer algorithm around it. It'll be mostly computer generated, which it is today, whether you want to believe it or not. Most of it is just coming out of all kinds of places, and it's coming from a computer. And here's where we're at. And of course, now fast forward 10 years, 11 years, and now we're in the thick of this thing. And it's just it's not a new thing. It's not a new shiny thing. It's not a separate thing. It's just part of everything that we're doing in marketing, similar to what happened to content marketing.
Right.
It just became marketing. And I had a conversation with somebody the other day just about content marketing. Like, did you ever think that when we talked about marketing, it would be like half of it or more is just, content marketing philosophy and strategy? And I said, well, yeah, I thought someday it would, right. Maybe not this quickly, but I think the same thing. Do you think the same thing has happened or is happening with AI, that it's just becoming part of marketing? Or do you think that it's still separate?
No, I think it is. I think right now it is seen as separate. And I think part of this, and this gets into a little bit of where we can talk about the where the state of AI is in, here we are in mid-September of 24, talking about the state of things. And in many ways, I think what we've seen is the hype cycle get to a peaked pitch, right? We've seen sort of the promise of, or the fear of what was going to come. I mean, remember in the very early days, people were having toxic freakouts about what was going to happen soon, right? It was, it wasn't like, oh, this is 10 or 15 years away. People were like, I'm worried about what's going to happen next month.
Yeah. And like a March of 2023 time period.
Yeah,
there
was a
freaking out.
Creatives were freaking out. Writers were freaking out. Business people and marketers were freaking out, and it subsequently sucked all the oxygen out of any sort of discussion. Everything became, to almost a comical point, everything became the discussion around what generative AI was going to mean to things. And I think in many ways, what we've seen is the same kind of reality sets in that happened, because it continues to remind me of the hype and the fear and the uncertainty and the doubt that was prevalent during the 1999, 2000, and 2001 timeframe, as the internet started to really become a business priority, right? Like truly e-commerce was was going to spell the death of everything. E-commerce was going to, bookstores were going to disappear overnight. You were never going to have a bookstore again. Magazines were going to disappear. Newspapers were going to disappear. Everything was going to disappear, and it was going to be chaos, and the internet was going to change the world, and in horrible ways and in amazing ways, and all those kinds of things. And a number of those fears just never came to pass. And it's starting to follow, at least from my observation, we're seeing a similar path followed, where maybe this whole, and this is something I get to in my presentation, the whole meme of, AI is not going to take your job, but somebody using AI will. I think that my prediction at the time when that meme came out was that it was bullshit. And I think it's even more bullshit now. And in fact, what's funny about that meme is that the first part of it, AI won't take your job, that's actually the truer part, right? What has happened, the results of what has happened, from the stupidity of CEOs who have tried to fire a bunch of people and have AI take over their jobs, is AI is replacing people. I think in very dumb and silly ways, but the people using AI, and there's actually new research, and I speak to this in my talk. Gartner just came out with research looking at 300,000 job placement ads, right? So for help wanted ads, as well as we did research. Content Marketing Institute did research on the state of sort of jobs and careers and marketers. And the Gartner research basically came out and said nobody's requiring AI as sort of a marketing thing, right? In other words, there's no sort of, we're getting rid of Jane who doesn't know AI because Paul knows AI. That's not happening right now in business. What's happening is that AI is becoming a thing, but it's becoming a thing like typing has become a thing, or like word processing became a thing. It just becomes a skill that the existing people are forced to learn. Like everybody's learning it, right? And in varying degree. And so it's not the whole, sort of like Luddite, I'm never going to use it. It just isn't true. You're kind of using it whether you want to use it or not, whether it's searching for something on the internet
or any software.
Or any software you're going to use as part of your everyday marketing, it's there. So it's kind of getting embedded into everything, which has its own implications, which we can certainly talk about. But very long-winded answer to your question, I do see it becoming part of marketing, but I see it just becoming a small level of upskill into practical use as at the individual level, right? At sort of the individual contributor level sort of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm curious as you go through kind of the ways that you're using it and the way that I'm using it. It's when we got into the whole metaverse thing and started to talk about digital wallets and tokens and tokenization and stuff, like that happened super quickly. Like it was like, oh my God. And then there was a lot of people that said, okay, this is the only way that it's going to be. And of course, people still use things and do things, but that's not true, and that hasn't happened. And then you had a group this time with AI do the same thing. Oh my God, we have to give up everything. No, we're not going to do anything else. None of the philosophies and strategies of marketing count anymore. It's all this. And it's funny, so the same people that you and I know were on that at the same time. It's always like, what's the next thing? Nothing else matters. It's always this. And I think we just have to all keep in mind that all the learnings and the things that we've been talking about and the things that we've been doing over the past 10 years are still going to play a critical role. Will these tools help us get there? I think is the question. And how fast will it help us get there? And maybe do we need less people to do certain things? I think that's where I guess I would think about it as working smarter. I think if you're a marketer today and you want to work efficiently and more intelligently and not waste time on things that don't need to be wasted. That's where a lot of these AI tools come in handy. It's unnecessary to do some things of the past you can do especially with content creation. And I know we're going to talk about a lot of them. So
yeah. I mean, it gets to, so, I mean, just to tee up what I'm going to talk about at MAICON, which is a little bit of this sort of, I don't know if it's a pushback necessarily, but sort of a reality check on what's actually happening with generative AI. And it's not necessarily the sort of copyright, or is it scraping people's content, or those kinds of things, which is an interesting angle, right? And I do touch on that because there's a really interesting philosophical discussion to have around the idea of, is content data, right? And, if you think about the difference between data and content, and so data is usually sets of facts or information that is used to make a decision, right? Which, if you start to think about that definition, everything to an AI learning model is data. And in fact, they call it that, right? They want to scrape the data. They want to go through, the copies of War and Peace and every novel that's been written. And the AI looks at it, the learning model looks at it as data. It is simply information that it uses to make decisions about how to generate more content.
Mm-hmm.
Content, on the other hand, as we would say War and Peace, or a great novel, or anything, or my blog post, that's not data. That's communication. I have intent behind that. There's creativity behind that. It's not necessarily information, simply straight up facts to help you make a decision. There is a way that we assemble the words or the imagery to help me create a communication about something that is valuable, right? And so we separate those definitions like that. But it's interesting that where you see companies starting to look at the applications of generative AI as a content creation tool, it is in that I'm creating content for intent. I am creating, people who I had somebody come to me the other day and they said, I just wrote my new book, and I wrote the book using AI. Basically it's a new business book, and they wrote the whole book using ChatGPT.
What is that? Like, by the way, before you go on, what does that mean? Like, they took all the content from ChatGPT and put it in the book?
Okay. Yep. They basically prompted ChatGPT with help me.
So they organized the book using.
They organized. They not only organized it, but then they had it write the chapters.
Yeah.
And then they edited those chapters. And so the entire book was generated by ChatGPT. And I said, great, I can't wait to read it. It sounds like a very average book. And it's so, I mean, and I think that's
yep.
It's as I've said many times before, right now, as it exists today, the way that generative AI works is it doesn't give you the best content. It gives you the most probable content. And so most of the time, and I know those who are really into prompt engineering say, well, you can get really specific with prompts and really good with prompts, and you can get some very interesting differentiating things. And it's like, yes, it's a sort of weighting of scales, right? You can spend so much time on the prompt that you actually get something specific and differentiated, but you've spent so much time on the prompt. Why didn't you just write the content yourself? And so there's an interesting tension there, I think, that's going on. And what I get to in my presentation is AI and generative AI can be an incredibly productive tool that can help us do lots of things. And we'll get into how we use it professionally here in a minute. But the point is that we don't conflate content creation with a simple workflow state that is like something happens there. Creation happens. If you look at a classic workflow of a business or a media company or anything, of how something goes from idea to expression of that idea, it's like literally from a spark in someone's eye all the way to a film or a book or a blog post or whatever. Creation happens at every single status on the way there, right? It happens certainly at the creation of the idea. Then it happens in the communication of that idea so that help with people or myself can actually get my head wrapped around it and put an outline to it or put a thing to it. creation also happens at the editing process where I sort of, that's not good. I'm going to actually redo that and press on that idea a little more, or I'm going to press on that idea a little more, or, and so on and so forth as it goes through all the way through the workflow state, and basically gets all the way to the end where it can continue to be used, by the way, in distribution and measurement and all those kinds of things. And so the key is that you have to understand the problem before you can actually get any efficiency or scale out of the tool. In other words, right now, for most businesses, for most people, when we think of create, we think of this sort of black box of stuff. Well, ideas go in and stuff comes out. But of course, it's not. We actually do have a process behind that. Good or bad, we just don't understand it very well most of the time in business, right? You ask a CEO, you say, well, okay, how does content get created in your business? And they go, I don't know. I just send my idea to the team and the team figures it out. And then great stuff comes out. That's most people's answer to that. The key is that you have to know that process before you can understand whether or not AI can be a tool to help you at any one of those individual workflow states. So that's what my talk is about, which is you have to understand your content strategy first before you can understand whether AI can be a little bit of a help, a lot of help, or any help. And until we do that, we're literally just, I make the point that we're in a Dunning-Kruger sort of thing, right? You literally can't if you can't recognize what good looks like, you can't know what the AI is going to provide for you. I mean, it's literally like, if I don't know the topic, if I don't know what a good idea looks like, anything AI comes back with is going to seem like a good idea. And and I test this out. It's so funny. You can do this yourself at home, go to AI and ask it for, to express some sort of idea, write me a short blog post about this or do this kind of thing. And then when it writes that, 300 or 500 words or whatever it does, say, is that as good as you can do? And the AI will go, oh no, I can do better than that. And then it rewrites all 300 or 500 words again. And then I say, is that as good as you can do? No, of course not. I can do better. And then it rewrites it again. And you could repeat that process forever. And basically, there is never a time when the AI is going to go, look, man, number 2 was the best one. Shut up. That was the good one. You should just go with that because it's based in fact. And here's all the, blah, 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 blah. It'll never do that because it's always built to build in the bell curve of the average. And that's, you just have to remember that when we're creating content with it.
It's so funny. I get these emails all the time that say, I can make you 1,000 pieces of new, fresh content using AI, whatever. To your point, what's my problem? What's the problem I'm trying to solve for?
Right.
And does that solve it? I mean, that's
exactly it.
Yeah. You might not need to do any of these things.
That's exactly it. Or, by the way, you might enjoy doing those things, right? I mean, this is where the companies like Anthropic and Chat and OpenAI and Microsoft, where they're really fumbling the ball when it comes to marketing and messaging, basically assuming, so it was the CTO, I think, of OpenAI who has recently been, out on the speaking circuit and talking about all these things and basically saying in so many words that, creativity, creative people, yes, we could reduce those using great tools like ChatGPT because probably you didn't need all that, those creative people anyway. And it's like, really? Okay. Is creativity really a problem that needs to get solved with technology? I mean, is that the issue? And that I think is that's the source of the pushback, right? That you're seeing now in sort of the hype, which is, is this really a problem that we need to solve?
Yeah.
This idea of creativity and rewording things and rewriting and expressing ideas. Is expressing ideas really a problem that needs to be solved with technology? Maybe not.
I love your answer about it's going to be an average book. And I think that's a good, you're not going to get the Mona Lisa from the graphic output of ChatGPT or of Grok or whatever the case is. You're just not going to. You're going to get something that will be, it'll work. And sometimes, and that's what we'll talk about it. And sometimes that's what we need.
Sometimes it's
something
exactly
quick,
what
fast.
you need.
Like when you use is it Sonu?
Yeah,
Suno?
That's right.
When you use Suno, for the ads,
Suno.
For the ads that we'll be playing here in a second. And that's, a really good example of we just need something usable. I don't I don't want to go through all the rights, permissions, and whatever, or I don't want to create something myself because it's not worthy of that time. I just need that's like a podcast image or that kind of thing. We'll talk about that in a second. But before we get to our do we need to
let's actually before we get to our personal ways that we use AI, let's use some AI and pay some bills. Does it feel like your teams are getting pulled in a million different directions on a million different platforms? That's why HubSpot brings everything into one easy-to-use customer platform. With everything at their fingertips, from AI-powered chatbots to instant performance insights, everyone can deliver killer results and grow revenue faster than ever. Because when your teams work better, your business grows better. Visit HubSpot.com to get started for free today. Are you weighing your next podcast? Why don't you try The Science of Scaling? Hosted by Mark Roberge and brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. Each week, Mark, the founding CRO at HubSpot, senior lecturer at Harvard Business School, and co-founder of Stage 2 Capital, he sits down with the most successful sales leaders in tech to learn the secrets, strategies, and tactics to scaling your company's growth. Mark's Q&A episodes are awesome for the straightforward advice from today's great business leaders. You can find Science of Scaling wherever you follow your favorite podcasts.
Like Sade.
Yeah, maybe? It's groovy. What I put in was what I put in for the prompt was a relaxed rap beat with a total what did I put? Ambient feel. And that's what it came back with.
Ambient. Yeah, that's it. That's what I was feeling. Ambient.
Yeah. Yeah, ambient. Yeah, ambient feel. Yeah.
All right. Do you want to go first?
That cool one.
Do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
You go first.
Okay.
You go first.
So
it's not your fault, Joe. It's not your fault. It's not your fault.
Jeez, it's another Good Will Hunting reference.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's funny. I was trying to think of how often do I use AI tools, and every day I use a little bit of something, and I wrote down 4 things that I've used very recently and how I'm using it, and maybe somebody finds it helpful, and I'd like to get your take on it. So the easy one is I've been using Chat GPT 4.0 for all my newsletter or podcast images. When I type in, I want a picture of whatever, and I need something for this podcast, I type that in. It generally gives me the exact thing that I want I very rarely have to go into something else. And I can put it into my newsletter, put it into the podcast, and that's wonderful. And it saves me a lot of time because I used to go out and say, what royalty-free images can I use? Or if I really wanted to get crazy, I would ask a designer to put something together, which makes no sense for a podcast image to do that. I just want something visual. It doesn't have to be great. Doesn't have to be perfect. Done. So I've been using that. That's one for images. So what I have been using it more of is if there's a report, let's say I did this with a financial report, is about a 60 to 75 page financial report that I wanted to go through and know the high points, but I didn't want to read it. So I threw that into ChatGPT and it uploaded it. And I said, would you please give me a summary of all the important points of this document? I do that all the time now. So that works really well. And then I think I shared this with you on the podcast previously for my first novel, The Will to Die, when I need to know something about a character's past or what they've done, and I've already written it, but maybe I can't remember it, or I don't want to get out the hard copy and figure this thing out. I've thrown that I've got a whole thread on ChatGPT where I can refer to and say, tell me about what's Robbie's history, what's Robbie's birthday, how did Robbie and Will meet, what were the details, specific details about Will's father dying, whatever questions I need to ask because I'm writing a sequel to that. That's really, really helpful. So I love that with any long form content where I need to use and ping that specifically and ask questions about that data. So I've got multiple threads set up into ChatGPT 4.0 that I can use and say, okay, I'm going to that one. I need to ask that one questions, and that works really, really well. And then I shared this one about travel. I do I do a lot of travel planning, and I love to plan travel. So I will go in and I will set up a thread. And I think I mentioned before about going to Bavaria. So I will ask a whole thread about Bavaria, and I will have it look at different links that I'm interested in. And I would basically create a thread on expertise around going to Bavaria, and it will spit out itineraries for me. And I will tweak those itineraries on that. But based on, I would say, well, take out all the Hitler stops. I don't want to see anything about Hitler. I want to exchange that for to go to a beer garden or something like that, which is a true thing. I'm actually working on that.
Yeah.
And then I would say, okay, great, that itinerary. How do I do this without renting a car? Or how do I do this? And it saves so much time, Robert, by just setting up those small threads. And of course, I mean, you can, if you're talking about marketing strategy or whatever, you can do the same kinds of things. I'm just not working on my content strategy now. I'm working on traveling, but I use it for the same types of things. And that's where I keep going over and over. Whereas I used to have to spend a lot of time on search, or I used to have to ask for an assistant's help or something. I can do this myself with an individual thread. And as I teach these threads a little bit more to create whatever it is about, one's about finances and one's about travel, and I have these all set up to help me optimize my life, if you will. That's where I'm getting the most bang for my buck right now when it comes to AI. So there you go.
It's great. It's great. I mean, and I have similar but slightly different cases, which I think will help round some of that. I'm curious before I jump into some of this, because one of them for me is using images as well. And I think there's an interesting quick discussion we can have there about imagery and the same sort of reasons that we use for the background music in the ads versus the thumbnails on a blog post or the images for a newsletter or for a podcast. So say again the sort of thinking there, right? Because I think what you're saying, and this is, by the way, I'm in agreement with this. The reason I think it's okay to use it for those things is because the content isn't about the imagery, right? It is literally there to provide a bit of a visual interruption, so that it's not just a wall of text, or so that, that it's literally something that is decorative, right? In a way, it's not part of the story. In other words, the image itself is not part of the story. Now, somebody might argue that it should be, but I think the thinking is that if it's background music in an AI, the music in the back of an ad, nobody cares, right? I mean, the fact that we can actually groove to it is actually a nice thing, but it doesn't matter. The music behind an ad, because it's not the point. The point of the ad is to copy the text that you're reading that's supposed to convert you to do something. So it's literally atmospheric. It's not supposed to make it itself known. It's like plumbing, right? And then on the other side, like a image or an email or a blog post cover, it's literally decorative. So for example, I don't like, because I think they're starting to have a look to it, AI pictures of people. I just don't like the look. I don't like the aesthetic. And they all have the same aesthetic, by the way. It kind of looks like a photo, but it kind of doesn't look like a photo. It kind of is a little too perfect, and maybe they have 6 fingers or 9 hands or whatever, but all of those, I just don't like the aesthetic of the way that it presents imagery. So I tend to use like abstract. Like I'll literally purposely prompt it to say, I don't want people, I want an abstract image of, the concept of hope, right? And it'll give me an abstract painting or an abstract sort of thing, which I find more aesthetic to me, and serves its purpose as sort of a cover image. But do you have any sort of a take on where that line is for you? Like, when would you actually go, no, it is worth engaging a designer for this?
Well, so to that point, you're absolutely right. I would say it's needed, but like I need an image, but it's not critical and it's not very important. Right. I'll use AI. If I'm using for, let's say, a cover of the next issue of my print magazine, there's a designer working on that, a human being.
All right.
That is so critical, because the reason that cover exists is it needs to be opened. If somebody doesn't open that, like, it is the most important thing, is the visual aspect of that cover. I want to trust that to an expert. I want to trust that to a human being, and I want it to be differentiated. I don't want it to look like anything else. It has to be based on our specs, on our vision, and our tone that we set for the whole magazine, and whatever the theme is. And I don't want to entrust that to putting it into a machine where I'm going to get something that's already been created. I mean, you're not getting anything original yet out of any of these. You're getting an amalgamation of something, and it's kind of throwing it out there. I'm like, great, boom. I don't think 2 seconds. That's why I never use a secondary prompt. It's not that important.
Right.
But yes, if it is a critical importance, if it's on my website, if I need an image, like for a important page on my website, I'm probably hiring a designer to do something like that, and not say, oh, well, I'm just going to throw it out here, and whatever it comes up with, it's fine. So I guess needed. I need something imagery, but it is not critical or important. I would use AI for that. Yeah.
And so the ramifications of that, of course, are, going back to the whole somebody using AI will take your job versus somebody AI taking your job, et cetera. In that particular case, what we're really saying here is that ultimately that level of everything creation, whether it's text, imagery, audio, video, et cetera, seems like the ripest place for replacement, right? In other words, if your job is to make music, right, for backgrounds for stores or for elevators or whatever it is, probably something that'll get replaced with AI, right? Because it's only meant to set a mood, or to be, it's not meant to basically provide any sort of, unless of course it is, sort of surreptitiously getting you to put more in your shopping cart or something like that. But the point being, it's just literally background music, or in some cases coding, right? Coding, has been one of the jobs that has been named a lot in terms of the structure, and the data aspect of coding is often talked about as something that AI might replace, or the background image in a painting in a mall, right? I could very easily see artwork in a mall, which is only literally meant to provide some visual sort of architectural disruption. Art in a hotel, for example. Unless you use that as a differentiating point, it could literally take over kind of those elements of the creative idea. So, yeah.
And it's, by the way, it's already happened. I mean, I've been in publishing for a long time, and I've seen where we went from working outside the computer to taking a magazine in the physical space and putting it onto the computer. So you had a production designer, and that production designer moved to some software program doing production design. And when that software program became good enough, those production designers were the first ones to get let go.
That's right.
During 2001, 2002, and they never got their jobs back. But the real artists and the real creative designers that really brought something specific, they do amazing layouts and amazing cover design. They were protected. They never lost their jobs because they were really talented, and they did something very specifically. We had one person on staff that could just do pictures, draw pictures of people that were amazing, and we used them in art throughout multiple magazines. They were always protected because we always needed that kind of design done.
That's right.
I guess that's what you think about is well, if it's just production design and something that any software program, this is not a new thing.
Well, it's a great metaphor, right? Because, back in the day, I can remember my mom getting into, sort of desktop publishing, where typesetting stopped becoming a thing, right? But the actual typesetters, the people who did typesetting, were also in many ways, some of them weren't, of course, but many were layout specialists. In other words, they weren't just typesetters, but they knew how to lay out a design of a magazine or a print piece in a compelling way. And so what desktop publishing basically made irrelevant was the typesetting part, but the layout design part became even more important.
Yep.
And so those people started to learn to use those tools, not to do typesetting, which happened, was just sort of a commoditized piece that could happen anyway. Anybody can do, the computer can do kerning and all that sorts of things, but choosing the right kerning or choosing the right way to lay this out, or choosing the right way, the best way to lay out a block of text became an art form that so many, adopted and could evolve and spend more time doing, because the time spent typesetting, how many times did my mom used to really just bitch because as a typesetter, she would have to do the easiest way of doing it because of time, right? Because of the way that time was, she had to do it in a very straightforward way. She couldn't play and design because time didn't allow for it. Well, the computer changed all that.
So let's talk about the different ways that you're using it.
Yeah, so it's similar. Interestingly enough, one of the ways, and I'll come to your sort of summarization of a large report. I literally did this. I'm doing this a lot these days, but literally did it last week. I had a client who basically had their entire sales department, and their sales department is 200 people, do sort of recorded transcripts of customer interviews where they said, why did you choose us? What is your problems? What are your, they were really doing they were trying to get to the heart of, some customer problems. So every salesperson was required to record their conversation with their customers and ask them a few questions, like, leading questions like, why did you select us? And why, or if you didn't select us, what, why did you go with a competitor? And really get in some. And it ended up being like 30 pages of not the actual transcripts, which was way even longer, but 30 pages of summarized transcripts from these, 200 salespeople, spanning, conversations with, I don't know, 150 or 200 customers. And the interesting thing is, basically then the marketing team wanted to take that document and pull out, okay, here are some stories we should be telling. Here's some blog posts we should be writing. Here's some, here's some content we should be creating for our website. Here's some positioning and words that we should be using. All those kind of, typical persona type research and messaging research. And the fascinating thing was, I stuck the document, which was again, 20-ish, 25 pages, stuck it into ChatGPT and said, give me the summary. What are the themes? I said, give me the 5 to 10 themes that are coming through in all of these discussions, and, blah, 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 blah. And I said, and by the way, I prepped it a little bit by saying, this is what the company does. This is where they value, et cetera. And what are they not talking about that they should be talking about? And it came back with, roughly 12 different themes. I would say of them, 8 of them were really good and interesting and insightful. Other 4 were sort of like, okay, you're misunderstanding what that means. And, you're sort of looking at that, and I could go through the detail and go, oh, right. But it was like, themes were like, a number of customers said this was a problem, and it was able to semantically analyze it and sort of pull it all together into categories, which then we could look as a priority in our editorial strategy for that client and say, there you go. Now there's an editorial strategy you can get your head around. So it's saved me hours of reading through all that stuff and, making an Excel spreadsheet and making tick marks and all those sorts of things. So it was fantastic. Another one was as a planner. So I do a lot of workshops and, for clients, especially educational workshops about various topics. And so if I take my curriculum, like my marketing 101 curriculum or my content marketing curriculum, basically it's roughly 24-ish, 30 modules of class stuff. And of course, when I do a workshop for a client, it's some combination of those things, right? It's a combination of those 30 classes. And because they don't want like one thing, or they don't want like 2 things, they want to combine, mix and match. And so, it ends up being sort of a bespoke workshop for client X. And so figuring out an agenda for that can be really hard, right? Because you want to break it down, but you don't want to break it down exactly as it's broken down in your class curriculum, because it doesn't really work. Basically 2 1-hour sessions doesn't mean it's a 2-hour connected session. It would just feel odd. So what I do is I've taken my class materials, which have all the class materials, and I've fed that into ChatGPT 4.0. And basically, whenever I do a workshop that I need to sort of combine things, I tell it, I need to combine these elements of these classes, and I need to do a 90-minute workshop. Can you deliver me an agenda for that. Like, what would the agenda of that workshop be? It'll write out the agenda with the combination of abstract for each agenda item, the time that I should spend on it, et cetera. And it gets it about 70% right, 70 to 80% right. And then I go through and I edit and change it and put it all together. And it's a real time saver for looking at that and putting together an agenda. And then I also do it for the typical things, like, I upload my presentation, and I say, give me an abstract for this, write me a 50-word abstract, might be a 150-word abstract. What are the main takeaways for this thing? Saves me from writing an abstract that, and I can change it and say, hey, I want this to be a little more provocative. And then very much like what our friend Andrew Davis does for his videos, if I have to do a lot of promo videos for places where I'm going to go talk, or, things that I'm promoting for clients or those kinds of things. And I'll say, give me a video script for, X, and it's got my voice and it's got everything like that. And it's literally gives me a 30-second video to do the ad copy. And in fact, this last time for the ad that I did, not for the HubSpot CRM, but the ad that you hear in this show for the podcast, AI wrote that. AI wrote that script for me. So there you go.
So you don't think that our ad scripts are important enough to?
No, I rewrote it. I mean, it's 30 seconds, right? But I wanted it to get to. I see. Here's the thing. I find it really hard. One of the hardest things to do is to write 30 seconds worth of script.
Oh, it's so difficult.
And so what I end up doing is I'll write the script and then I'll feed it in and I'll say, make this, because I know now that 30 seconds is roughly a couple of hundred words. And I'll say, you've got to reduce this down to 200 words. And so take the most important points and reduce it down. Then I can edit it and make it compelling and do all the things I want to do for it. But it just helps me truncate and shorten things a lot.
I love what you said. The only thing that I was thinking about when you talked about not going through all the transcripts and having that, I wonder if we're missing side benefits of the opportunity to go
totally we are
those things. Yeah. So you are sacrificing, you're sacrificing some of that where you would not get the ideas or things or the brainstorming that you would get because you're not going through that yourself.
100%, because what I missed guaranteed in that, and by the way, went back at a later date, because one was, this was a time thing. It needed to be done quickly. Yep. But two, it's so great that you brought this up, because two, I actually did go back and read all 20 pages when I had more time and could read the 20 pages of it. What I missed in this particular case was that one comment from the one customer that was so interesting and compelling that to quote Star Trek, the need of the one outweighed the needs of the many. And so that one comment was really interesting from a creative standpoint, and I could pull it out. Now, in this case, I had sent that off, but yeah, 100%.
Yep.
You do sacrifice something when you take that shortcut, for sure.
It makes me think of the services where they'll say, you don't have to read the top 100 business books of all time. We'll give them to you in 10 minutes each, or whatever. Right. You miss the aha moments that happen when you read, like you're reading something and then you hit that line. You're like, oh my God, I got to read that again. That's a life-changing event.
Exactly.
When that happens and you don't. So it's interesting that it can do all these things, but sometimes going through the grunt work of actually reading the thing or doing the research or whatever, it brings the benefits that
and I speak to, actually coming back to my talk, I speak to this thing where one of the, I actually saw this happen in a company where the new employee, what they were doing was, if you were a new employee in this company, one of the things that they would make you do is go through all of this stuff, right? To basically, all the processes, all the history, the content, basically, and your job as a new employee was to be able to speak to it, summarize it, and it was part of your learning, right? It was part of your onboarding to understand where everything is in the company.
Yeah.
And what they had done was they had sort of truncated that by basically having AI summarize it all for you. And it didn't have it. So they were finding that these employees were not as well prepared because they didn't know they weren't forced to learn the details. And learning the details, as a lot of people know when you come into a new job, is really important, because sometimes, just to your point, those one-off things that happen are some of the most important things that won't get summarized by an AI engine.
Absolutely. Well, good. Well, awesome. Well, I hope that was helpful.
Yeah.
To somebody out there.
Hope it was entertaining and interesting. Yeah.
We'll never know. We'll never know. Because nobody sends
people
us.
Will. I have a feeling we'll get emails on this one. We'll get emails and comments on this one for sure.
Well, I guess for 446, we'll be back to our regular show. But it was nice.
We will be back to a new show.
I love these special episodes.
446 will. I mean, I guess it'll have the debut of whatever jersey of who.
Oh, geez, yeah. I mean, I'll send you one. I'll send you a Browns jersey.
Well, I'll send you a Cowboys jersey if you want. Yeah. I'll send you my Tony Romo jersey.
Just a couple days, and people already know. People are listening to this already know what happened.
They're already laughing because they already know who's going to have to wear the jersey next week.
All right. Yeah. I'm out.
All right. Very good. And yes, we will be back to you. One of us will be wearing the other's jersey. You're already screaming at your microphone on your headset or your YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube and you're saying, I told you so, it was, so yes, if it was me, I know. And if it wasn't me, ha, ha, ha. Anyway, we will see you next week with another regular episode, bringing the news to you of This Old Marketing. And until we see you again next week, remember, everybody, it's your story to tell. Tell it well. We'll see you next week on This Old Marketing. Hey, thanks a lot for making it this far in this week's episode, and thank you all for being a part of This Old Marketing. You can check out all the show notes of what we talked about today at thisoldmarketing.com, and it's also where you can leave us a review or a voicemail. We need those reviews and comments on whichever platform you follow us on. And if you haven't followed the podcast, please go do that and make sure you catch the latest and greatest episodes every Friday morning. We're on Apple and Spotify and all your other favorite podcatchers, of course, but we'd love it if you went over and subscribed to us on YouTube. That's right, YouTube. youtube.com/@thisoldmarketing. We'll see you again next week, folks, with another episode of This Old Marketing.